Hello. Hope you are well. I am pulling up your theory here, and I may be moving and talking a little bit slower today. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. It's been a little bit of a slow day. We got rear-ended over the weekend, and everything is fine, but I've noticed teaching today, I've been pretty stiff and on the slow side, so that's the warning before I get started. Might not be quite as mile a minute as it usually is. So theory looks like we did a fantastic job. So it's interesting here because all of your notes totally perfect. I don't want you to end up with the, oh, great, now what happened? You know, what did I miss? You really didn't miss anything. So your key signature additions look good. I noticed that's what you were doing instead of filling in like the specific sharps or flats for each chord, which you did a great job on. What's interesting is when you got to your second page, they start you off with some major, they're all major, some sharp key signatures. And so on these, you actually filled in just the sharp that would affect the notes in the chord that you had, that you were drawing in. And then when you got to the flat keys down at the bottom, you did the complete key signature with all, starting with D flat and then A flat and E flat. You've got all these multiple flats in there for the whole key signature, and you did that beautifully. So it's interesting because that's actually what we wanted for the first three on that page with the sharp key signatures. So it's kind of funny that when you got to the flats, all of a sudden the whole thing shows up. So that's a really little nitpicky detail. It just has to do with the rules of the theory notation. And so that's the only reason that I'm pointing it out. Now, if you had decided to just fill in the accidental for the notes that needed them, so if you didn't go the key signature route, and that may actually, now that I say that out loud, that may actually have been what you started to do, is just to add in the sharps, because I see on a few of them too, it looks like you were adding them on each individual measure. So that might be something that was part of the thought process there. Either way, if you were just going to label the sharps and flats on the notes that needed them, that's exactly what you would have wanted to do, is not put in, every single sharp that you might have in that key, obviously, just label it on the note that would need it. So since it was looking like more of the key signature route, that's where it's kind of like middle ground, a little bit of this way and a little bit of that way. So if you do the key signature, you do want to show the complete key signature. So for D major at the top, that would mean including the C sharp after the F sharp, even though there's no C sharp in the D major chords. That would be what you want for the complete key signature, and then all the way through, A and E major as well. So I'm really happy with these pages. Everything that we really wanted to focus on as far as the theory and the notation, you did a fantastic job on. So that looks good to me. Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, just let me know and I will try to say it in a less confusing way, or at least less long-winded. And so for next time, we're gonna go right on to the next two pages. So this is page 44 and 45. And again, my warning to you on this is don't overthink, okay? We've talked about some of this stuff before, and I know, especially in some of the more advanced pieces that we've looked at with trying to identify Roman numerals or different chord names, or what makes it, a dominant versus a major seventh, that kind of a thing, that's been kind of a sticky spot. This is not getting nearly as involved as what we've talked about in the past. So try and go into it with just kind of a blank slate. They really do a good job at outlining specifically the definitions, the details, and what they're trying to get you to do. So this is starting to look at basic accompaniment structure. most of the music that we have now and that was written for piano, with the exception of a lot of the early piano music, which is more of the Baroque style. When you hear, something like Bach, where both hands are kind of doing their own crazy independent thing, that is very different from something else. Like maybe before that there was Renaissance style music, and then before that it was like Gregorian chant and the lute. So obviously how music has been written and arranged and performed over the centuries has changed based on technology and the availability and creation of the instruments. But most of what we're familiar with now is a melody with accompaniment or chords, right? And so usually that's what we see in our music as well. The right hand has some kind of a melody, the left hand has some kind of accompaniment pattern. And sometimes that's like a lot of the stuff we've been doing with the chord charts. Sometimes it's blocked triads, sometimes it's a broken triad accompaniment, sometimes it's more like a waltz style, sometimes it's using inversions, sometimes you get more of like what you would see in a Dietmar arrangement, where you have kind of this more, this is very characteristic of Romantic era music, which is like if you think Beethoven primarily composed, and for a lot of it, I mean, really created the style of Romantic music, but that's where you get a lot more of like the extended patterns, things like that, right? But all of those, and that's obviously not all of them, but those are all examples of different types of accompaniment in the left hand that would be paired with a melody in the right hand. And so, sorry, I got a little farther away from me than I meant for it to. So what we're looking at here is the most basic breakdown of a lot of accompaniment. Accompaniment is just referring to kind of like the background chords underneath a melody. So and you can see on page 44, their accompaniment is just single notes, right? So it really is not getting deep into it. The big thing to remember when you go through these pages is that tonic and the Roman numeral 1 are both referring to the first note of your scale. So if you're in the key of C, the note C is the first note of the scale, and so that would be called, in other terms, the tonic or the one note or the one chord, if we're building a chord off of that note. Very similar to the idea of enharmonics. So if I play, I know you can't see that. Okay, so this is an F sharp. Okay, so was the other one, just off screen. So an F sharp is the left triplet black key, right? For every group of 3 black keys on the keyboard, the very leftmost one is an F sharp. But I could also call that G flat, right? It's a half step above F sharp, or sorry, a half step above F, so that would make it F sharp, but it's also a half step below G, so I could call it G flat. There's multiple names for that key. Same idea here. When we're referring to scale, degree, or which note in the scale are we using, there's multiple terms that we can use to refer to it. So that's what they're getting at. Same thing with dominant. Anytime they mention dominant or Roman numeral 5, which is the V, then that's referring to the 5th note of the scale. Okay, so they basically have outlined the example for you in the top of page 44. This is what you're going to do for the other, let's see, 4 examples of these 2 pages. So you're going to make them all look like the example at the top of page 44. So on 44, you will see they've got a couple different things here. The first thing they want you to do is identify which 5-finger pattern you're using. And again, this is something else we've talked about in the past that has multiple names. So the 5-finger pattern can also be referred to, if we're talking about C, for example, the C 5-finger pattern. We could also call that C position. We could also say that it's the 5 notes you'd use in the C pentascale. Or we could even just say it's the first 5 notes of the C scale. It's all the same thing. So you're identifying what are the 5 notes being used in the melody. You can also cheat a little bit if you want and look at the key signature. That will give you a really good indication. Then they want you to identify the tonic note. So again, remember that's just your first note of the scale, and the dominant note, which is the 5th note of the scale. And then they want you to fill in what are the 3 notes that you would have in the main triad. So a C triad or a C chord, what would the 3 notes be that you'd use there? And then what are the non-triad notes in those five notes that they give you for the 5-finger position, or like the pentascale? So on the example, the triad notes would be C, E, and G, because C, E, and G gives us a C chord. And then the non-triad notes are D and F, because if you're going through the first 5 notes of the C scale, you end up with the 3 that give you a chord, but you also get those 2 outliers that are not in the C chord. So then what they want you to do, again, you're just going to make all the exercises here look like the example. So let's see. They want you to label the measures that use mostly the notes in the triad with the Roman numeral 1. And then they want you to draw in that note in the bass clef as the accompaniment. So for the first measure there on the example, the notes in the melody are primarily C, E, and G. So that fits for the notes in the triad. So you would draw in a C and then label it with the Roman numeral 1. Now, if you end up with a measure that uses primarily the notes not in the triad, for example, measure 2 in the example, they give you F, D, D, very much not in a C chord. So that's going to be accompanied by the dominant. So you would draw in a G in the bass clef, just like they did, and then label it with the Roman numeral 5 underneath. I believe that is it. Did I leave anything out? Nope, that's it. So it's literally the simplest form of accompaniment you can think of. It's just single whole notes based on what will sound best with the melody. Okay, and they're giving you it's really black and white. Normally it's not this black and white when you're trying to figure out what chords go best with a melody, because normally it's not only triad chords or triad notes or non-triad notes. Usually it's more of a mixture, or you end up with, you know, like a minor 7 chord, something like that gives you a lot more interest in the music. But here it's just tonic and dominant. I think I've talked about it enough. I'm sure you're tired of hearing me go over it. So do what you can with that. And again, try not to overthink it. Do as I say, not as I do. I probably just gave you way too much for that. Sorry. Hopefully it helps. If not, just don't tell me. All right, your sight reading looked great. I saw that you did send me a separate email about that. I did already, looking at the book, figure out which one you had done. So you did a fantastic job there. It looks like you're moving forward really well with that. So keep up the good work. Let's see. You'll get the newsletter tomorrow. I am going to outline a little bit more to it, but I am going to reopen for in-person lessons starting next week. So I know that you are going to be gone on the 14th. I don't know if you saw in a previous email, I asked if you would want to do a lesson on the 21st instead, because you'll have been back for at least a little bit, you know, not expecting you to come back and immediately practice your tail off, you know, before a lesson. But if you are available, then that could potentially work. I don't have anybody as of right now during your usual spot on the 21st, and then we would just have the 21st and the 28th. If you want to do something different, I have no problem with that. We can do another video lesson when it's convenient, if you just want to check in on stuff before coming in, or if you want to stay doing the video exchange for the 28th. Doesn't matter to me, whatever you prefer and are comfortable with. So I just wanted to throw that out there, see if you were interested in doing that. Like I said, it's just whatever your preference is, that's what we'll do. So your A harmonic minor scale looked really good. Don't feel like you're not moving forward with that, and you may not, in which case awesome. But if you do feel like, oh, why can't I still get this smoother with both hands together, try to not dig into that too much. Your hands alone scales look fantastic. Really, the idea here is we're reinforcing the notes within the scale, as well as the general technique of playing through each hand. It's not gonna, change your life if you can play the 2-octave scales, both hands together, quickly or not. And I'd much rather that you're approaching it as cautiously as you are, because it doesn't do you any good to play it really fast and wrong, right? So much better to take it on the slower side, even if it feels like you're sitting there for a while, or like it should be coming together faster. I think you're making good progress with it. So for this week, we will go on to the A melodic minor scale. So this is the last form of minor scales. And with this one's kind of the interesting one, because this is the one that changes from going up to going down. They're going to be different. So going up, we're going to raise the 6th and the 7th notes of the scale. So we're going to keep our G sharp like we had before. Again, gosh, ignore my terrible height here. My arm should be like this, and instead it's like this. I don't play here normally, so there we go. All right, so we're going to keep that G sharp raised like we had in the harmonic minor scale, but we're also going to raise the 6th note. So we're going to change the F natural to an F sharp. So what you end up with is almost an A major scale, right? If we had an A major scale, we'd have C sharp, F sharp, and G sharp. The only difference between the major and the melodic minor is that the C is still C natural, like the natural A minor scale. So we end up with this. Kind of a combo there. So what's interesting is that's your pattern going up, but coming down, you go right back to natural minor scale. It's exactly the same. So we get rid of both of our sharps on the F and the G. So the whole thing ends up looking like this. And there you go. So all of your fingering stays the same in both hands, just like you had for natural and harmonic minor. And that is the only change, is going up you add an F sharp to what you were previously doing for the harmonic minor scale, and coming down it reverts to natural minor. All right, so on to the pieces here. Well, I'll talk about Hannon first. All right, so Hannon, it looks like we're making good progress in the key of G. I know it is not easy for just the actual execution, as well as just shifting your thinking. You're doing a great job so far, so keep working on that. I know, especially coming down to there's probably going to feel like more hiccups, because I think it's a little bit trickier for the left hand to remember the order of the fingering coming down. Now that may not be the case for you just on that particular one. That's what I've noticed for myself. So we'll continue working through transposing to G, knowing that you're doing it all correctly and you're off to a good start. All right, let's see. So then keep singing. Okay, I am super happy with this. You've done a wonderful job getting the whole thing together. I'm glad you figured out a hack for being able to view all the pages at once. That would be really annoying to have to keep pausing to do the page turns. So I like the tempo that you have. It's, I believe, a little bit slower than the original, but I think especially for the nature of this song, it fits it really well. The next step is looking at the places, like you said, where you're kind of working slowly through a couple of places to get it to match the speed of kind of the main section there. And with that, that's really, yeah, that is the next step, is getting the whole thing up to a performance tempo, knowing that it doesn't have to necessarily be what their performance tempo was when they recorded it. It just needs to be consistent all the way through. The reason that is what we'll work on next before going over like adding a vocal to it is because if it has unexpected gaps or pauses, it's going to be hard for a vocalist to follow. Usually when you do any kind of collaboration, I mean, just like what we've done with piano duets, you really have to know your own part super well before you take it then to combine with the other person or people, because if not, you know, just like putting hands together, if you can't play something well with one hand by itself, you're going to be in a world of misery when you try and put it hands together. So similar idea here. I think you're really close. I would keep focusing on those same slower sections, or the sections where you have to stop and think, and don't fall again into the what song was that? My Way, into the My Way trap. So still make sure that you review the entire piece at least once in your daily practice. Another good strategy is to kind of bookend the smaller sections, right? Start by playing the whole thing once through, and then go back and work on those tougher little spots. And then when you've reached a good stopping point there, you'll go back and review the entire piece all the way through one more time. So that's kind of my recommendation there. I think you've done a great job, and you don't have anything incorrect, which is awesome. So yeah, can keep up the good work. What we can do the next time you come, if you would like, and again, it kind of depends a little bit on when you'd like to come back in person, but once you've got it feeling comfortable all the way through, we could try in a lesson, just I can sing the vocal part along with you, just so you can get used to hearing somebody sing it as you play it, because I can follow you depending on, you know, again, where those parts of the song are. So even if it's not totally smooth all the way through, I can still follow you to give you an idea of what that would kind of sound like and feel like when you have a vocalist who's not yourself, right? Or playing along even like with the original, to kind of get a feel for that. Let's see, Sonatina. So Sonatina, again, you've made a ton of headway with this. I am really excited about, oh goodness, sorry about that. Let's see. For some reason, I always forget when I start watching the video and I can realize, oh yeah, this is the Sonatina. I always forget that we're starting with the second movement, and I'm thinking, where on earth is he starting from? Oh right, it's the second movement. Crazy. Okay, so I love it. You have almost the whole thing down, and from that point on, again, it's just getting that smoothness all the way through. It's partly confidence, and it's partly making sure that the execution is really focused on larger phrases instead of maybe from one note to the next or from one measure to the next, right? In order to really achieve that fluidity all the way through, that's how you need to think about the notes and the phrases as well. It has to have a long-term through line, otherwise it will always kind of feel kind of choppy and segmented. So with this one, let's see, I think there wasn't really that much for me to go over. Like I said, your progress on this is fantastic so far. So there are a couple of left hand notes that I wanted to take a look at here. So the first part is measure 4. Okay, yes. So on measure 4, you have the D, and then you have the 2 notes after that. So you, I believe, are playing F sharp and C, and your top note there is actually D, I'm sorry to say. So you want to have F sharp and D in measure 4 instead of F sharp and C. Next place, oh, and that repeats as well in measure 25 on the next page. Same thing there. Measure 7, what was measure 7? Okay, yeah, measure 7, first half of the measure is totally fine. We have D, G, B. Second half here, so this would be the 4th note of the measure. I believe you're playing E there, so you end up with E, F sharp, C. And the 4th note there is actually another D. So the whole measure on measure 7 should be D, G, B, D again, F sharp, C. Okay. So that, again, these are all really little. It looks like just a small mistake in the reading, or with gauging the interval maybe, and then having that become what was practiced. So next part was measures 9 and 10. So actually I think this should help with making this section maybe sound a little bit better. So on measure 9 for your left hand, you end up with F sharp and A. We just missed the sharp from the key signature for the left hand. You've done a great job making sure that you've included that all the way through this piece. This is the only place where we missed it. So it's not F natural and A, it'll be F sharp and A. So that you end up with, right? And then on the next measure, again, I think this may just be a misjudge in the interval reading. So here, you're not going up to G and B. Your bottom note actually moves down to E. So your 2 notes are E and B. So if I were to just start on this 3rd line here, I should have this part was all correct. So once you move on from past measure 10. So again, very, very little things there, but you can tell it does kind of change the quality of the chords. Chords and melody, right? That's your accompaniment. Let's see. Yeah, actually that was it. It was just those few spots. So really, really well done there. Hopefully that's pretty easy to fix. So then the next place I wanted to take a look at was down at the bottom of page 20. So measures 17, 18, and 19. I don't remember if we've actually seen this anywhere else. We may not have. But if you notice, there's kind of this little squiggle next to your chords there in the left hand. So this means you're actually going to arpeggiate or roll the chords. So instead of playing your D7 chord here all at once, right, you would roll it from the bottom up. Right? Now, there's no only one right speed for this. Some people prefer to roll their chords a little slower, and some people prefer them to be so fast it's almost imperceptible from just playing it all 4 notes at once. I probably want to land somewhere in the middle, or at least more on the slow side, so we can appreciate the fact that you're rolling the chords there. Right, kind of adds to the drama. So that is the only thing I wanted to take a look at there. So I would start experimenting with that in your playing. It may take you a while to kind of get that feeling comfortable, but just start again slower. Even if it's very slow, even if you feel like there's absolutely no way this could be right. Right? Again, it's still important to have your hand placed before you actually start playing. You're not trying to just land and magically find the rolled note chords. Or the rolled chord notes. So you want to still be intentional about getting the placement and everything like you were going to play it all at once, but start it out slow and then try and increase your tempo until you get the result that you want. Like I said, there's a couple different ways you can end up with that. So it depends on your preference. The important thing is that your notes are controlled and evenly spaced. So we don't want something that's kind of like this or a little like this. So you want to make sure that it's a very smooth roll from bottom to top and that everything sounds well on purpose, basically, controlled. So that is that section. Speaking of speed in how you approach something, your grace notes are really not bad. So if you wanted, you could even keep the tempo that you are playing them in at right now. With these, again, there's a couple different options. Now you will traditionally hear it just as quickly as you can actually play it in right before the downbeat. But that also depends on some other factors. It depends on the speed of the song. It depends on how you're interpreting that particular section. If you were playing something in very slow, and again, it had a lot of what we call rubato, which is not strict metronomic feel. It has a lot of flow and give and take, and you're speeding up and slowing down, and a lot of romantic music and romantic era music has that kind of a feel to it. So, sorry, I just totally lost my train of thought. Oh my goodness. Okay, yes, speed of the grace notes, my bad. So with that being said, you really have some options there too. If you like how the result sounds, then you can keep the speed that you have. So, you know, everything that we do when it comes to working on the music should result in focusing on the sound, right? Over the look or the rules behind it, because everything is written in its own time, and so there are going to always be people who say you should play it as true as possible to the composer's original intention and take no artistic liberty. And then there's going to be people, if you swing all the way to the other side of the pendulum, that say, well, no, it's music, it should be freely interpreted by whoever is performing it, and not really taking into account. Ideally, you want to kind of land somewhere in the middle. You want to understand the context during which time the music was composed, what the instruments were like at that point, what was the popular music of the day, what was everyone else doing, and what was the composer's original intention for what the piece should be. But now that's your framework, and you have to bring that to actually sound like music. You have to bring it to life and get the notes off the page, and that involves artistic expression and your own interpretation. And so ultimately, if you like the sound, then as long as you understand where it started and why, you're good to go. So yeah, if you'd like them to be faster, then that's a great goal. I think you can absolutely get that. Again, the idea is we want the execution to be smooth and clean. So you want to make sure that you gradually work on increasing the speed little by little, and that it can be well controlled when you want to go through that at any point in time. We don't want anything to come across sloppy. And let's see. Sorry, I'm working through my notes now. Oh yes, okay, so then measure 30. I wanted to take a look at this rhythm here, so don't need that. I'm gonna start from the pickup into measure 30, so this is page 21, the third staff down on the page. So here, I'm gonna play through it once and then kind of break it down for you here. Including the G in measure 31 to end the phrase there. So you've got kind of a lot of things going on here. You are going to, when you get right to measure 30, you have your quarter note and then your eighth note. That should just feel like any other quarter eighth rhythm combination. then you're going to have kind of this sweep of 3 fast notes all together because of the 16th notes. Now we have kind of a grace note, but it's really just functioning as a pickup, and this is the cleanest way to write it out on the page. So it should end up feeling like this when you have those notes added. But the C there is a dotted 8th note followed by a 16th note. So it's not going to be little triplet and then everything else is really evenly spaced, because that's not actually the rhythm. You want your fast triplet and right? So that 16th note is important there. Just wanted to point that out, that will actually feel different. And then just because why have it the same way twice? In measure 34, you have almost the same measure as measure 30, but here they do actually write out just three plain 8th notes. So in measure 34, you end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it is just one note right after the other, evenly spaced, after you get through that little section with the little 16th grace notes there. All right, let's see. I think the only other thing that I wanted to go over was the form here, just so that, again, you kind of have it in your head. Now, I'm sure you have recognized a lot of this just in the work that you've done on it. I just want to talk through it so that, again, sometimes it actually can be very helpful to have labels. It's kind of the idea of looking at bigger pieces of information instead of individual units of data. So it can help to have kind of an idea of the form in your head and think about the piece section by section. You are right about the repeats, and I know that you had started going back to do the second repeat in one of the recordings there. So yes, as long as you're aware of those, you're good to go. Let's see, so your first 2 lines here, this would be considered your A section. We've got our main theme, we've got a nice resolve at the end of the 2 lines, and then it's even more obvious that it's its own little section because we're going to repeat that section again. So we would call the beginning of this form AA, because we're going to play that A section, that first melodic theme, twice. Then we get to the next 2 lines. And these 2 lines introduce a totally new pattern. We have new accompaniment in the left hand. For the first line entirely, we totally break the old accompaniment pattern, and the melody's totally different. So this would be your B section. Now the last line on this page is actually kind of interesting because it's really functioning more as a cadenza than as part of the B section. I know it's included within that and with the repeat there. But you could call it part of the B section, but it really is kind of working as its own thing. A cadenza is kind of a virtuosic solo, and here it's a little more simplified, but you can even see in the rolled chords, like I said earlier, it kind of creates this sense of drama, and so it's meant to just be kind of a little bit of a solo excursion outside of the main themes of the piece. And then in measure 21, you can see it brings you right back to the A section again. So then you'll repeat that again, the B section, if you want to call the cadenza something separate, that would be your C section. And then back to A one more time. And then we get to the last 3 lines here. And the last 3 lines of the piece are working as what we would call a coda. So it's not really... we only play through it once, which, especially compared to the rest of the piece with all of these repeats, is kind of unusual in and of itself. But a coda is just this additional section to end the piece on. Sometimes, again, it goes off on its own virtuosic excursion, and you can kind of get a little more creative with what the piece is going to do in order to give it like this more a better sense of finality when it ends. And so that's really what we have here. You notice we have a lot of the same motifs and ideas of the original theme, but we've got new accompaniment, we've got new broken chords that show up here, we've got a completely new melodic section, and in the last few measures, every time it pops up to the G to do kind of that descending melody. And then we've got a couple of blocked chords in between both hands to finish it off. So that's really your section, and what I would encourage you to do is maybe even write in some labels or like do some brackets, but start to group those sections mentally in your head. I'm sure again you're already doing some form of this just because of how the pieces and the sections sound, but that can be helpful in memory recall and in how you interpret the actual playing of the piece when it's all said and done. So the coda section is looking great for the right hand so far. Like I said, your left hand, it does introduce some new things, so just keep track of your F sharps from the key signature and you should be pretty good to go. If you have any questions about the notes or any of the fingering options there, just let me know. Similar to the rest of it, you do have some options with how they write out some of the fingering sections, so take into account what they have, but ultimately do what makes sense and what fits your hand best. Okay, I think that is everything. So yes, please send me if you want to take a look more at your sheet music for, what was it, Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. If you want to start working through fingering and then send it over to me to take a look, that's totally fine. We can get started on that one. And Mary, did you know, I think that's a good combo for this year. I think we'll have enough time to really work through them both well, and it'll be good to have one that's a little bit more of a review and one that is more on the ambitious side. So that looks good to me. If we do our, you know what, I'll need to look. I probably still have copies of those from last year sitting around somewhere, so I will take a look and find them. If I do need a copy of anything for the next lesson, I will let you know. So otherwise, I think that is everything. So have a wonderful trip. I'm not sure if you're going for like the dog show reason or it's just pure vacation, but hopefully either way it's super relaxing and beautiful, and yeah, you guys have a great time. So I will see you when you come back, and like I said, if you need anything else in the meantime, just let me know.